Hello, everyone, and welcome to the 10th ever Highlight Haven interview. My name is Matthew Heiserman, and today we are joined by a very special guest. He is an ESPN reporter for the New England Patriots. Let me welcome Mike Reiss to the show. It's great to have you on.
Matthew, it's great to be with you. This is the 10th one. I'm
Yeah,
honored to be part of it. This is awesome.
yeah, absolutely. Let's get right into it. Your first job with the Patriots was in 1997 when you worked for the team's official newspaper. You joined ESPN in 2009, and now you are one of the leading voices for the Patriots. What has it been like taking these small steps to eventually get where you are today?
Oh, it's been like one big dream, Matthew. When I was your age, I think all I ever really wanted to do was be a professional athlete. And when I realized that probably wasn't in the cards for me, my father had said, "Why don't you go write about sports for our So I went down to our local newspaper in Framingham, Massachusetts, and I started writing when I was maybe a freshman, sophomore in high school. And I just have never stopped. And I could have never imagined that this is what it would ultimately result in.
Yeah, absolutely. Speaking of writing, not only are you a reporter, but you're also an author. Back in 2015, you published a book with Patriots Hall of Famer Troy Brown called Patriot Pride: My Life in the New England Dynasty. Can you describe the process of that book being made and what it's like to be an author?
So books are really hard, Matthew. So that's the first thing I would say. That is like not the most fun process to go through. I'd say the best part was when you turn it in and you're sort of done with it. And then when it comes out, it's sort of neat, to see a book. But so Troy was a player I really admired, actually before I even started reporting, as a fan of the team. I'd say in my late teens, early 20s. I
Mhm.
remember watching the Patriots, and Troy was someone I identified with as an underdog and a great story. And so then I started to report on him, and he had retired, and he was wanted to do a book on his career. He had someone that he was working with, and it just, they couldn't get it to the point where Troy felt great about it. And so Troy approached me and said, "Would you consider maybe finishing off my book?" And I said I'd be happy to. And that's sort of how it happened. And I, as long as he was happy with it, Matthew, I was happy. But I will tell you, that was a tough one to do.
Yeah, and can you describe that connection you were able to build with him while helping him with the book?
Definitely. So at the point, so Troy, we had a connection just as like reporter player for many years. And then once he retired and he actually started working in media a little bit, the relationship changes at that point. It becomes a little more peer to peer. And so I would go over to his house and we would, you know, reminisce about his playing career. I would take notes, and then I would put stuff together and run it by him and, make sure he felt good about it. And we did that, like, I want to say it's now almost 10 years ago when we were going through that process. I want to say we did it like weekly over the off season. So it was a pretty laborious process. And we were seeing a lot of each other at that time.
Yeah, and of course, being around this Patriots team, you got to know all the guys, Tom Brady, Rob Gronkowski. Even as a professional, was there ever a moment, maybe towards the beginning of your career, where you just remember being starstruck or even overwhelmed by the fact that you were able to be around those kind of guys?
So that's a great question. I think the one that I would say maybe stands out, and I don't know if I would say starstruck, but just trying to build up the courage, the confidence to ask Bill Belichick a question.
Mhm.
I remember that being a challenge, early when I was starting in like the year 2000, Belichick's first year, 2001, you know. So I actually remember the first player that I ever asked him about. I think it took me half a season, Matthew, to ask my first question in a press conference. And I think I asked him about a cornerback who was like a 5th round draft pick. His name was Leonard Myers. And I remember writing the question down, and sort of looking down, not even making eye contact with him, and being like, how would you describe what Leonard Meyer's potential might be for the team? Very like formulaic and not conversational. And it was just to try to get like my first question out of the way. So that would be the story that comes to mind on that topic more than anyone.
Yeah, and we'll take a guy like Belichick. How did your, feelings change when you were talking to him in the future? Did you get more comfortable in that situation? Did you start to know him better?
I think so. I think part of it was getting to know him better. Part of it was just growing my own confidence in my job, right? So think about you. This is your 10th episode. Like, I'm going to guess you probably feel more comfortable in your 10th episode than you did in your first, right? Because you got more reps doing it. And I think the more time you just realize, like, if you're doing your job, you're being fair, you're being objective, and you're trying your hardest. That's really all you can do. And this might be one of the greatest coaches of all time, might be one of the greatest players of all time. They're also human beings. They're people just like us. And I think we should all remember that with anyone that we talk to. Just because you're a high achiever, it doesn't put you on a different plane from just a human perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, throughout your broadcasting career, you've been able to cover many amazing games, talk to many awesome people. Is there a moment that really stands out to you as your favorite or most memorable?
So the Super Bowls are hard to beat. Like, those are the ones, Matthew, when you're there, you just say, how lucky could you be, right? I mean, to be covering all these championship games, and then to be covering 6 actual championships. I think those are the obvious ones. But really, what I love about the job, and I'll give you like a recent example. I really love the game. And I have so much respect for the players and the coaches within the game, because I think it's really hard. That I love to tell their stories. I love to break down and the game, the strategy. And so I just wrote a story. It's on ESPN.com on Jacoby Brissett. And I met Jacoby in 2016 when he was a rookie coming into the Patriots as a 3rd-round pick. He got traded the next year. So he was really only here for, like, call it 16 months, 17 months. But we had developed an initial connection. Then I sort of lost track of him. Like, we didn't see each other on a regular basis because he was in Indianapolis for 4 years, Miami for a year, Cleveland for a year, Washington for a year. Now he's back. And so we have like 8 years to catch up on. We sit down and we talk about those 8 years. And it was like, to be able to tell that story, Matthew, of what his journey has been with all the ups and downs, especially where he's going to be starting for the team. And those are the things, like, I know you asked like which moments made me stand out, but like it's moments like those every year, every week, whenever they happen, those are the ones that really like uplift me.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, of course, when you know players in an organization, something that's really important is building the trust and respect of that player. You want to make sure that they respect you. How are you able to build that trust and respect over the years? Because that could potentially lead to them being more open in conversations, them talking to you more. How is that so important? How are you able to make that happen?
Whew, this is hard. And I think I really don't, I think it's actually no different in any walk of life. And I love that you asked this question, because I wish I had the emotional maturity that you're showing to host your own podcast, to ask questions like that. Like, I didn't even think like that when I was at the stage of life that you're in, Matthew. Like, you have to treat people like you want to be treated, and I think we all deserve we should respect ourselves first and foremost, but we also should respect each other. And so I think that's what we're getting at in this conversation is, a player might not be very good, and we can say that, like, the player's performance was not good on this day, but we can't let it like devolve, if that's the right word I'm looking for, into personal attacks, um, cheap shots, um, making the player the butt of a joke. Like, I that's just not why I got into this. It's to me, it's disrespectful of the game and just not the way I would want to teach like my kids how to treat other people. So I think you're asking me like, how do you earn the trust and respect of players, coaches? Like, I would just say it's not about me and play. It's just about how to treat people in any business owner, student, teacher, um, teammate. Do you know what I mean, Matthew? Like that's by treating people the way you'd want to be treated. I would hope that that's where the mutual respect starts.
Yeah, now we just discussed some broadcasting questions. Now, of course, you cover the Patriots. Let's move over to some Patriots questions. And just 2 days ago, Jacoby Brissett was named the Patriots Week 1 starting quarterback over rookie Drake May. Do you think this was the right decision for New England?
So based on what I've seen, Matthew, I do. I feel like it was the way it was all headed all preseason, training camp, off season. Jacoby Brissett took all the first team snaps. So I think where it got complicated was about 2 weeks ago. Gerard Mayo, the head coach, said that Drake sort of turned a corner in terms of being less deferential to Jacoby and really competing for the job. And when that happened, he started to perform better than Jacoby in the eyes of Gerard Mayo. So the question to me was, could Drake, were those 2 weeks that Drake had that made an impression on Mayo enough to overtake like the totality of Jacoby Brissett's work, which goes back to like April? Like he had just been consistently better. And to me, 2 weeks is not greater than 6, 7 months, and Jacoby's experience, Brissett's experience in the system, his veteran status in the league. To me, you'd be really putting Drake May at risk, putting him on the field right now.
Yeah, now, do you expect him to take that role, Drake May, at any point this season? And if so, when might that happen in your eyes?
Yeah, so the odds tell us it'll happen, right? Like how many starting quarterbacks start and play all 17 games, right? Like, so the first thing, Matthew, is like, does Jacoby get injured? And we can't predict that he will or when that might happen, right? So that's probably where we should start on that, especially as we've seen the Patriots offensive line has been shaky at times. So start with that. If we're looking at pockets of the schedule, like I think Jacoby would get the first 4 games, unless it was just terrible the first 2, 3 weeks. So maybe you assess at week 5 what it looks like when you're coming home for back-to-back home games. The other part of this, Matthew, is the Patriots have a very Packer-influenced system right now in their personnel department with Elliott Wolf. And they really their history has been to sit young quarterbacks for extended period of time. So it wouldn't shock me if we don't see Drake till late in the year, depending on how well Jacoby Brissett plays.
Yeah, and I mean, you mentioned that we saw with Jordan Love, of course, behind Aaron Rodgers, and he has really been great last year, especially when he was the starter for his first season. If Drake May does eventually earn that role this season, how do you expect him to play with that role?
So he has tremendous skills, physically, mentally, and he's like a great kid. So to me, like there's a lot of good to work with there. I think the hard part to assess is like what's going to be around him. How's the offensive line going to look? How are the receivers going to look? Will the tight ends be healthy? So what you don't want to do is what we saw happen to Mac Jones the last couple years, where they just put him in a position where there wasn't enough infrastructure around him to help him succeed. So that would be the other part of this, Matthew, that would concern me for Drake May. I write about this in a piece that's going to post on Sunday morning. Bill Parcells, the former Patriots coach from 1993 to 96, Pro Football Hall of Famer. I was telling the story about how when he was the Cowboys coach from 2003 to 2006, he had Tony Romo, or 2000, in that range. And Tony Romo was a rookie. And someone once asked him, like, hey, what do you have to lose for putting Tony Romo in there? And Parcells said, well, you could lose the quarterback if you put him in before he's ready. And I think that's such a powerful story, right? Like, everyone wants to see him play. He's so talented, but there's so much that goes into this that you got to be careful that you don't rush him onto the field too soon and really potentially dramatically affect his development.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of, normal fans just watching the games on Sunday will think, why don't you put your young guy in, see how they do? But of course, there's lots of things that could backfire if you do that. Now, earlier we were talking about Bill Belichick, and obviously this is the first year Bill Belichick is no longer the head coach. What do you think Gerard Mayo as the coach is going to look like, and how might this team look different than in previous years with Belichick?
So the losing Belichick, I think, is significant in terms of just the brain power. He knew so much about the game. He could coach any position. So like one difference, like, was when Gerard Mayo was asked about quarterback play, he sort of acknowledged, like, well, that's not really my thing. I sort of rely on the experts for that. So he sort of leans on Alex Van Pelt, the offensive coordinator, Ben McAdoo, a senior assistant, T.C. McCartney, the quarterback's coach. Belichick, like, he would sort of take that one himself, right? And because he is just so well versed in the game. So I think that's one big difference. But I think another difference that maybe is worth discussing is the culture within the team. It's loosened up under Gerard Mayo. I think players feel like a little bit of a weight lifted from them that, Gerard Mayo says, you got to show the players you care about them before you demand from them. So he's really invested in them as people and tried to get to know them and their families. And so I think culturally, there's a notable difference with the way they're doing things. And we'll see if that leads to more wins. If it doesn't, ultimately that's what it will be measured by, right?
Yeah, and obviously we just talked about coaching. Now on to some players. Just over 2 weeks ago, star linebacker Matthew Judon was traded to the Atlanta Falcons for a third-round pick. How do you think not having this veteran on the team anymore may shake up New England's defense this season?
Well, so I don't think they'll be as good, point blank, without Matthew Judon. He was one of their best players. This is a case where the business side of the game sort of got in the way of the Patriots fielding their best team because they didn't want to extend the contract at a level that Matthew was willing to accept. And so they decided, instead of having this thing looming over them, this distraction behind the scenes, that they would take a significant asset, a third-round pick, next year. So Anthony Jennings going to have to step up at outside linebacker. O'Shane Zimenez, another player, going to have to step up at that position. Joshua Uche at outside, situational pass rusher. But to me, it's sort of simple, Matthew. Like, anytime you take away one of the best players on defense, like, usually you're not going to get better as a result of that.
Yeah, now I want to talk about a potential breakout candidate for the Patriots this year, whether that's someone who's been playing really good during off season, maybe a Matthew Judon situation where a position has opened for them. But is there a guy that you think can really shine this year?
So a potential breakout candidate, let's see, that no one might be talking about. I'm thinking defensively, there's a lot of the same players. Christian Gonzalez, I don't think would qualify because I think everyone knows about him. Let's go offensively. And why don't we say Jalen Polk, the second-round pick out of Washington. Gerard Mayo, very complimentary of him, said when he puts the pads on, he gets even better, does a lot of the dirty work. and that he's a type of player you want to build your team around. And I think we've seen he's got strong hands, maybe not the fastest receiver, maybe not the biggest receiver, but he's just a good all-around receiver. And so I'm not sure he'll start. They have KJ Osborne, Tyquan Thornton, and Pop Douglas, they've been sort of starting as their top three, and Polk could be the fourth. But to me, I wouldn't be surprised if it's not too long where he's in that top rotation and making some big time plays for the team.
Yeah, and of course, the Patriots' first game this year is on September 8th against the Cincinnati Bengals in Cincinnati. What is your prediction heading into that matchup?
Well, I started to think about it a little bit. Bill Belichick used to always say week one games are hard to predict, right? Neither team is ready for the regular season. I got to be honest with you, Matthew. The bottom line is I just don't think the Patriots roster is as talented as the Bengals roster. So in a scenario like this where you're going on the road, your roster is not as talented as the other team, I would lean toward the Bengals, as the team that's going to come out with the victory in the game. But I would leave myself an opening to say, like, some of the strangest results annually happen in week one just because teams aren't always ready. What type of training camp did you have? Is Jamar Chase even going to be there for the Bengals? Like, sort of a big question, right? So could the Patriots go in there, run the heck out of the ball, and potentially steal a win? Absolutely. Like, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that can't happen. Do I expect it to happen? No.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, I do want to get into some final questions before we wrap things up. And one of those questions is getting into the broadcasting industry. Was there an inspiration that you had that you really looked up to?
So I had quite a few. So I start with my dad, who was a sportscaster. His name is Roy Reiss. He was at Channel 7 in Boston. So I still look up to him to this day. I think he has a tremendous understanding of the media, the business. So that he'd be the first one. Will McDonough, the late sports writer for the Boston Globe, was someone who I just I admired him so much that because I knew when I was reading him, he was telling me something I didn't know, and he actually broke the barrier, Matthew. It'd be fascinating, like, subject if you ever were interested in studying this, of like, used to be like newspaper reporters were newspaper reporters, TV reporters were TV reporters. Will McDonough was one of the first, if not the first, to sort of bridge the gap to be a newspaper reporter who showed up on TV doing, sideline reports or, information reports. So he would be one. Lenny Magliola, the columnist from the Metro West Daily News, who I would read him every day growing up. And the beauty about Lenny Magliola is that he would cover high school games, but he would cover professional sports games. So I played baseball in high school, and I might see him at my baseball game reporting on the game. And then the next day, I would read a story because he was covering a Red Sox game at Fenway Park. And he just had a great writing style, and he's just a superhuman being. And, I just remember thinking to myself, if I could write like Lenny Magliola, like, that would be amazing.
Yeah, now one last question before we wrap things up. If there was one piece of advice you could give to an aspiring sports broadcaster like me, what would it be?
Well, you're already doing it, Matthew. You're so far ahead of where I was at that point. I am so impressed. So we met, just so everyone knows, at this play-by-play sports broadcasting camp. So we were there. We talked for an hour with me to the whole group at the camp, and then we took pictures at the end. You came up to me. You asked me for my email address, which took a lot of courage, and that's how we got connected. So what you did right there, just keep doing that. Keep meeting people, politely asking them for their information and making those connections, and then go out and do it. Like, you've got 10 podcasts under your belt now. Like, that's 10 reps. That's fantastic. So I am a big believer in, I'm going to tell a quick story. You're going to you're going to get a degree. You're probably going to go to college. I'm just assuming that. You don't have to. I don't want to put any pressure on you, but you're probably going to go to college and get a bachelor's degree, whether it's communications, journalism, something. You're going to get an English, you're going to get a degree. That's great. That can't be the only degree you get, the bachelor's degree. You need to go out and get your BT degree. And this is what I learned. It's called your been there degree. BT for been there. That means you go out and get real experience. You do podcasts like this. You intern at this college radio station or at the college TV station or at the college newspaper or at the local TV station, radio station, newspaper, and you go in the field and you go interview that coach after the game. That's a heartbreaking loss. And you're like, this is the last thing I want to do. Ask this coach whose team just lost this game a question. But you do it because sometimes it's hard, but you put yourself in those positions to do the job because you've been there. And I want to tell you where I learned that. It's my first job with the Patriots, 1997. The head athletic trainer, his name was Ron O'Neill. Unbelievable man. So he's in charge of the health of the team, the players. And he told me, man, I studied my whole life to do this. But until I actually got out on the field and had to take care of a player, there's no substitute for actually being there when a player can't move his body because he just, had an injury on the field. How do you react to that? He goes, that's your been there degree. And I never forgot it, Matthew. And that's the advice. I know it was a long answer, but that's the thing I would just impress upon you to keep doing. Get that experience, that been there degree, and you are on your way.
Yeah, and with that being said, I can't thank you enough for coming on. I really do appreciate it. Is there anything else you want to say to the people watching before we wrap things up?
Well, I say thanks for watching. I mean, this is awesome. Keep supporting your podcast. And to you, study hard. Thank your parents, your family for supporting you, and be kind to others, and just keep doing your thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, big thanks to Mike Reiss for being the 10th ever Highlight Haven interview guest. And as always, we'll see you next time.